right. One of those little adaptations that just helps me get done what I need to get done. All right. So you are here at the Neurodiversity at Your University presentation, which is part of TAP, or the Autism Program's Tuesdays at TAP, which are events that are being held each Tuesday during April. April is Autism Awareness Month. Last week, we talked about police safety. Next week, we'll be talking about healthy relationships. And the last week in April, we will be talking about caring for the caregiver. And so I will be sending out on Facebook and some of the same places where you found the link to this presentation. I'll be sending those out, and you can hopefully sign up for those. They will be great informational meetings as well. I want to set the tone for this evening. We are tonight talking about neurodiversity, which basically means differently wired brain. And there is now in society a movement, an awareness. Well, actually, we're going from calling this month Autism Awareness to Autism Acceptance. We're moving forward in society's understanding of what autism is. We are trying to reevaluate the word disorder as something wrong with the person who has autism, and realizing that the brain is wired differently, and people with autism will have disabilities that are associated with their autism, but this is a difference. And whereas we were calling autism spectrum disorder ASD, we are now starting to see ASC in the literature as autism spectrum condition. Again, to take that negative connotation away. We here at TAP serve 0 to 21, the population 0 to 21. So we get a lot of youngsters who are newly diagnosed with autism, and we are very respectful of the medical component of diagnosing with autism, and the fact that families, individuals need to be connected with services. But we are also very respectful of individuals who are autistic, and that is part of just who they are. That's their identity. And we want to support people with all different concepts of how that works together, but I think it works together perfectly, because once you are diagnosed with autism, you know that you're autistic, and it helps you form your identity around how your brain works. And that's super duper important. And if anyone has ever worked with me, they know that's one of the first things that I talk about. So we will be looking at autism from a strength-based perspective. There are so many things about the autism brain that are beautiful and wonderful. And really, my main goal is to foster discussion here at the University of Illinois about autism, so that it can be a safe place to be autistic, to disclose to people that you have autism, to ask for accommodations, to be yourself and not feel as though you need to hide all of your artistic traits to try to fit in. So that is the main goal of the evening. We have a panel of 4 adults who are autistic, and all of them are above the undergrad level, affiliated with the community or the university. I will have them introduce themselves in just a moment, but I think it's telling that we do not have any undergraduates who volunteered to be on this panel. I advertised to all people at the university to be on this panel, and no undergraduates came forward to be on the panel. So I think that shows us a little bit about the restraint people feel to let people know or to discuss their autism here at the university. I'm going to stop sharing while I introduce our panelists, and I'm going to ask them to answer 3 questions. They are questions that should take about 2 minutes each to answer, so that they're not going to be going into much detail right now about themselves. After a brief presentation to get us all on the same page, I will be asking them questions that are more in depth and speak more to their interests and passions and what they'd like to share this evening. So I'm going to start just with who's on the upper left-hand corner of my screen. That's Jennifer Huffman, or Dr. Huffman.
Hi, Jeannie. Thank you for including me. So very briefly about myself, I am a neuropsychologist and I'm an autistic neuropsychologist. I have a son with Asperger's. I myself was diagnosed about 9 years ago, and at the time, the culture wasn't really one that I thought I could come out and not have it impact what I do for a living, as well as myself and my family. And I think it's time, and I'm ready to not mask anymore and to come out, but I'm very nervous. This is the first time I've actually talked about it publicly. So I think you have been holding my hand a bit through this process. So I appreciate that, but that's who I am. And I'm glad to be here tonight.
Jennifer, I hope you see the love. Look at that. All right, yes, applause. Garrett Williams.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Garrett Williams. I am a second-year PhD student in the physics department. I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome when I was 4, and I wanted to be here today because I have a lot of experiences that have been impacted by the fact that I have Asperger's, and I just want to kind of stand here as sort of a proof of principle that, you know, if you have the condition, then you can be where you want to be too.
Thanks, Garrett. Garrett's famous to me for his positivity. I love it. All right, Kelly Sear-Smith.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming today. I'm Kelly Sear-Smith, and I work as an academic professional in the physics department at the university. Pure coincidence with Garrett. I have a doctorate in English from the University of Illinois, and I am currently enrolled as a graduate student in the College of Education. My dissertation topic is going to be on inclusion and success for autistic college students. We have a lot more work to do to, you know, as Jean was saying, to ensure full inclusion of autistics in higher education. So I'm very excited about that. And I mentor and coach autistic college students, and my son is a student, undergraduate student at Illinois currently. He did not want to come or present this evening, so I do think there is a weight of stigma on autistics, and I also want to affirm what Jennifer is saying, that it takes a lot of courage to come out as an adult autistic. I have only been out for the last couple of years, and we need to really reduce stigma all around and gain the valuable gifts and contributions of the autistic community. So I look forward to our conversation tonight.
Kelly, the world of autism is blessed by your wisdom and insight and courage. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jean.
Christopher Jones.
Hi, I'm Christopher Jones, and I am the front desk receptionist for the School of Molecular and Cellular Biology Advising Unit at the University of Illinois. It's my second go around with the university. I also worked from 2001 to 2005 in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and the James Scholar Program. So I'm happy to be back at the university. It's a great place for diversity and to expand and meet different people of different backgrounds and ethnicities. Unlike everyone else, I only have a master's degree in creative writing. I went to school at Eastern Illinois, not the University of Illinois. I got my major, or my undergrad was in journalism and public relations, speech communication. I was a double major and with a minor in public relations. And basically, I have a past of having been a newspaper reporter, which helped me get out of my shell a lot, to interact with the community and public. So I took those skills and brought them forward in life. And I believe in individuality, so we're all different, and I'll talk about that later, but that's my background.
Thank you, Christopher. I'm so happy that you're here. Okay, I'm going to share a little bit with the group, and hopefully you can all see my screen again, about autism. And I'm going to start by talking, well, first of all, I want to premise this by saying that I think a lot of discrimination and misconception comes from a lack of understanding. And so one secondary goal I had this evening is that people who aren't as familiar with what autism is walk away with a deeper understanding, so that people with autism can be understood. I think that's something that's a human need, a basic human need, to be understood. And I'd like to start by talking about some strengths, common strengths of people who are on the autism spectrum. I say common because people on the autism spectrum are as different as people who are off the autism spectrum. They have certain characteristics that qualify them as being autistic, but and there goes the motorcycle that always goes by when I'm on a Zoom call. So let's talk about some strengths that many people on the spectrum have. The first is this ability to intensely focus on an area of high interest. Dr. Huffman was saying that she was really lucky that her area of high interest was the brain, and now she's a neuropsychologist. So this intense ability to focus and memory for detail. Sometimes it's within the area of high interest, sometimes it's outside of the area of high interest, but really seeing details and memorizing them is a strength that people with autism can have. This can affect the ability to detect patterns. And so whenever there is work where pattern recognition is needed, a person with autism who has gifting in that area can be much more productive than a neurotypical person. And I hope you've all heard the term neurotypical. That's meaning typically wired brain, but I kind of don't like it because all of our brains are wired differently, right? But these are people who don't consider themselves to have autism. Another thing that I think is a real strength of people who are on the autism spectrum is a respect for the rules, because the autistic brain tends to see things as black and white. Once they know a rule, a person with autism is more likely to follow the rule than someone who doesn't have autism. This black and white thinking can also make them very loyal. Once they are invested in something, they will stay invested rather than the multiple interests and things that can pull the attention of the neurotypical brain. And people with autism in the workforce are noted to be very reliable. When you're asked to be there at 8, they show up at 8. And if they're asked to work for 4 hours straight, they can work for 4 hours straight. Very reliable and very dependable. Some challenges that people with autism face, I would be remiss to not mention that there is a medical diagnosis of autism. And here at TAP, we encourage people who are wondering if they're on the autism spectrum to seek out a diagnosis, a medical diagnosis. first off, what this does is it helps you know your brain and how it works, but and help you form that identity. But secondly, it opens up access to services that you may need if you experience difficulties in certain areas. So there's 2 diagnostic criteria that people need to meet in order to receive this medical diagnosis of autism. The first is a difficulty with social communication, and I've got a whole slide on that next. All right. The next is what's called restricted repetitive behaviors, which describes nothing about what it really is. But a brain with autism has a need for sameness. This can be seen in little ones who line their toys up. In fact, I saw a 2-year-old a couple of months ago take his Lunchable out of the carton and line up all of the pieces of meat, all of the cheeses, all of the crackers. And I thought, that seems like a brain who needs sameness. This leads to the black and white thinking that a person with autism often has. This can also limit the interests of the brain, so that where neurotypical people may develop interests based on their peers, my peers all like Taylor Swift, therefore I'm going to get interested in Taylor Swift. Through working with people on the spectrum, from my perspective, have noticed that it's something that the brain is just drawn to. It's a brain interest. It's something that isn't a choice. And therefore, people on the spectrum can be accused of, well, you can learn it when you want to, or you can pay attention when you want to. When really it's the brain wanting to attend to this one thing it finds interesting. And we all have brain interests. I like to talk about ice cream flavors. Everyone has their favorite flavor of ice cream. And that's not something we can necessarily choose. We can lie about it, but when we're given 20 different choices, our brain tells us which one we prefer to eat. So that is a brain interest. There are differences in the ability to regulate the nervous system or the sensory system, whereas a neurotypical brain will be able to regulate its sensory system without even thinking about it. An autistic brain oftentimes will need to regulate sensory information through things like movement or external accommodations like wearing headphones or talking about their area of high interest, but it'll be an external way of regulating deep pressure on their body, different things like that. This need for sameness can cause extreme difficulty with unexpected changes. And so life is so unexpected, right? And so if you can think about these people who are walking around near you, every time something unexpected happens, how upsetting that can be to them. So let's talk a little bit about social communication. I looked up definitions of this and I didn't like them. So I thought I'd give you some examples. Whoever taught you to follow where a finger is pointing to know what a person is referring to? Babies are doing this very, very young, and the absence of doing that can be a sign that that baby's brain is an autistic brain. Understanding other people's perspectives, that you can have an opinion and I can have an opinion and we can both be right. That you might be thinking something different than I'm thinking at the same time, or under the same circumstances. That is social thinking, social communication. Knowing how close or how far to stand from someone. Knowing when it's your turn to talk. Knowing how much to say and when to stop talking. Understanding and interpreting tone of voice, so that this kind of goes with the next one. So you know what someone means when their words don't match their intent. So you might see something that's the ugliest thing in the world and someone might say, ooh, that's real nice, right? but you have to interpret facial expression and tone of voice in order to understand the social meaning of that message. So hopefully that helps you understand a little bit about what social communication is and what it might look like when that's not something that naturally comes to your brain. There are things that I find all the time that they vary among people who are on the autism spectrum, and therefore they're common misconceptions because they're often stereotypes. And the first is IQ. People on the autism spectrum, their IQ can represent everything from an intellectual disability, which is below average IQ, all the way up to the highest IQ there is. And here at the University of Illinois, I think all of our students probably, we can assume, have an above average IQ. But we can take someone who has a lower IQ, and because they have this area of high interest where their brain learns very easily, we can assign to them a very high IQ and say, well, you can learn it when you want to learn it, and you must just not want to learn it, versus understanding that there is an intellectual limitation there. Conversely, I've had several students tell me that people think that a diagnosis of autism means that you have an intellectual disability, and that is false as well. You can't tell a person's intellectual abilities by walking up to them, whether they have autism or not. There's the introvert extrovert thing. I think that people with autism can oftentimes be perceived as being introverts because they might be quiet, or they might not talk when they're supposed to talk. They may remove themselves from an overstimulating situation, but they may in fact get their energy from being with other people. And I know just as many extroverted people with autism as introverted people with autism. Their areas of high interest are not only STEM areas, despite what we see with Jennifer, Garrett, and Kelly. Kelly has the English part of her, but Christopher, with his reporting and communication, is a good example of that. I know people who are history buffs, meteorologists, social justice is their area of high interest, horses, friendships. It can be really anything across the board. As far as race and gender go, if I ask a neurotypical person to close their eyes and picture someone with autism, most of the time they might describe to me an 8-year-old white boy, and that is completely false. Autism occurs in all races and ethnicities, and there is a large population of people with autism who are female. We could do a whole nother lecture on the female autism population. They are usually later to receive a diagnosis, and it's very hard to diagnose females on the autism spectrum. It looks completely different, and surprise, surprise, the research has been on males with autism. So just something to think about. All right. I would be remiss at this juncture to not talk about autism and employment. In my role here at the autism program at University of Illinois, it's at least every 2 weeks to 3 weeks that I get contacted by an employer who is looking for autism employees. This is something that is becoming more and more common. And so I wanted to address this tonight in case there were any employers here, and to talk to those of you out there who are undergraduates and eventually are going to need a job, because we are here and wanting to help you in that journey. The statistics show that 80% of people with autism are either unemployed or underemployed, meaning that they may have a doctorate level education or a master's level education and be working at a Starbucks. Why is this? Well, the whole way that we screen people for jobs is social. And if you have a social communication disorder, the interview process and then the evaluation process once you have the job, being social is something that you may not do very well at. Also, people with autism often need a supportive work environment that allows them to display their strengths rather than tells them that they need to fit into this typical environment. And what we found is that when you adjust the work environment to be friendly to neurodiverse employees, almost everyone benefits. So some tips for working alongside people with autism. One thing that is really prevalent in the literature is that people with the most job satisfaction and who are being the most successful in their jobs who have autism, their organization did neurodiverse training for everyone. So everyone understands what autism is. And that's what we're trying to do here at the University of Illinois. The places where people experience success see adaptation of the workplace as a two-way street. So it's not just, here's my work environment and you're autistic and you need to adapt to mine, but let me adapt what I'm doing to how your brain works. Evaluations need to be based on work performance, not social prowess. A research study recently shown that people who were let go for downsizing more often were let go because they weren't as socially connected and as socially efficient in their job. And they didn't necessarily look at productivity or accuracy of their job. And therefore, more people with autism were let go. Work within your group projects here at the University of Illinois, within your groups at work, to find a task that fits into a person with autism's area of high interest so that they are in their zone. And guess what? They're going to be way more productive than their neurotypical counterpart. I put this all in caps because I think we need to scream it. People or organizations need to have autistic people in leadership who are helping to make the decisions. I think it's common in all issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion for this outside group to be trying to figure out what's best for the underrepresented group without ever asking the underrepresented group. So we need to start thinking about what leadership qualities are. Is it your ability to answer a pretty stupid interview question? Or is it your passion about something, your knowledge about something, your excitement about something? And we need to be including people on the spectrum when we're making decisions for people on the spectrum. So I'm going to conclude here. Some couple of things I'd like you to take away. Hopefully, after listening to this, everyone will have a little bit better understanding of the strengths of people with autism and the challenges that they might face. I want us all to look into ourselves and recognize some of the misconceptions we might have about autism. Let's start thinking about autism and employment. As far as whether you are an employer, an employee, or a student who wants to get a job, know that here at TAP, we're really trying to foster employment success. And so this is a place where you can reach out, and we're still in the conceptualization and development part of how we can help students be successful in finding employment. Lastly is we want to work toward a safer university for autistic students, where it's okay for them to be meeting their sensory needs, where it's okay for them to be walking away from conversations that are overstimulating, where it's okay for them to not meet a social expectation or a social norm and still be accepted within the group. So with all of that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we are going to start some questions of the panelists. We have about a half hour left, and so we've got 8 questions to answer. What's the math? Is that about 4 minutes a question? Okay, so let's try to keep it to 3 minutes a question. And I'm going to start with Jennifer Huffman. Tell us about your journey to realizing that you're autistic.
Thank you, Jeannie. I will do my best to do that in 3 minutes. It'll be the condensed version. So I was born 48 plus years ago, and at that time, a colicky, sensory, screaming child that didn't want to be touched by her mother was called gifted, or they were telling the parent to do different things. And so really from the very get-go, it wasn't called autism at the time. It was something different. Something was standing out. They delayed kindergarten for me. My parents thought, she needed a little more time to develop. So they waited a year. First day of kindergarten, I still threw up over everybody because I was still so nervous. And then I get into school and I have speech and math because my brain worked differently. So what the teacher wanted me to focus on, I couldn't focus on those things. I think I did fine socially when I was real young, like second, third, fourth grade. We're running around, we're doing stuff, but it was really those nuances of junior high that became so significantly impacting that the bullying was really substantial. At that point, my parents were wise enough to actually have me change not only schools, but towns to give me a fresh start at that point. And I was very fortunate to come into Champaign, which had a lot more diversity in many different ways at that time. Still didn't really know what was, that this was going to be a journey. To me, I just did things differently than other people, and I couldn't do it the same way. And then in high school, I got into theater. And I became a very masterful masker for a very long time. Still didn't connect with the school piece. And so I was very fortunate after high school, because I made it through, but doing band, doing theater. I had these people that I call them autistic adjacent. They either were autistic themselves or recognized something inside me, and they attached and helped me launch to the next place. So for me, it was Parkland, and Parkland did a great job kind of redoing my cognitive beliefs about my abilities. I went into the U of I and I took a class that taught me about the brain, and it was a light bulb. It was, this is it. And there was literally, it was just like, there was no stopping at that point. But throughout that time, there was all the negatives that you see that maybe you think of repetitive behaviors and sensory issues. That's what I always had. And so I always had to shape my environment around what I could tolerate. And those are still things I have now. And we can talk about that later if we have time. But real quickly, the journey then was after realizing, okay, I finally made it, but I definitely had to do every single thing differently. I couldn't do it the same way as everybody else, and everything took more effort. Everything is more overwhelming. Then having one child who was kind of quirky, and then a second, and then a third, and then it's kind of pretty clear that this is something that's just a little bit more than just quirky, and this is who I am. I was formally diagnosed about 9 years ago, and at that time I was actually helping to do some book writing with somebody, and they were encouraging me to come out, and I just wasn't ready. I don't know if the culture was there. I was worried about the impact on my family and my company. I love doing what I do with the kids, and I was afraid that people wouldn't view me being able to continue doing that with that diagnosis. And now I realize that is exactly why I should be doing what I'm doing. So that's how I got to be here. So it's a journey that I didn't know was an autistic journey, but for many years now, I've known that's what it is. And now, as of today, I'm just coming out and saying that's what it is. And I feel like that's the right place for me to be right now. So that's my journey. I'm just a happy little brain pattern finder. That's basically, that's my thing.
And we're so thankful to have you in our community. All right. Let's see. Let's go to Chris. How would you define the autism spectrum, and what is the underlying problems with the spectrum as that confuses people about autism?
Okay, well, first I would like to say that inquiring minds that enjoy learning like to keep open perspectives. So I do have my perspective. but I'm also keeping an open mind to other people's perspective as well. I kind of, and I know we talked about this, but I kind of view the spectrum as a linear line. I know we've talked about the circle.
So I didn't do it right. I picked it for you and I misunderstood you. I apologize.
That's all right. I'm not totally married to that either, but for now, I'm going to go with the linear line. What do you think of when you think of a spectrum? You think of a rainbow, right? And you get different colors in the rainbow spectrum that are produced by components of light that there's reflected they're reflected differently. What I'm trying to say is that each autistic person is their own individual, and I believe that wholeheartedly. And I think that, you know, social workers and therapists, it's imperative for them to make assessments based on our abilities to find what our strengths are and what our weaknesses are as well. I've shared this thought with a radio podcast from a guy that's from Ohio, how I would like to see more social workers and therapists become more involved in helping the individual become who they are and what they feel comfortable with in life, and to work toward achieving their goals in life. You know, for me, part of the problem of being in a spectrum is, you know, you wouldn't put a policeman in a doctor's position to do surgery because they don't know what each other's role is. So likewise, you know, a lot of times people want to clump all individuals together based off of their perception of what autism is. And that's very faulty and very dangerous because that leads to a lot of boredom. You talked about the work, you know, being underworked or underemployed, or you might be in a class that you know, a lot of people are still out there with the assumption that they hear autism, so that must mean remedial or, you know, special education. But then I was in gifted classes. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 29 years old. So I went all throughout high school being in the gifted classes. I would have been bored out of my mind in a special education course. And, you know, it wouldn't have been fair to them. It wouldn't have been fair to me. So I believe wholeheartedly that, you know, we need better assessment of the individuals to see where we are. And part of that is awareness, but also part of it is studying the individual and getting to know the individual and finding out ways that we can customize their lifestyle to be beneficial so they can get the quality of life that they want.
Perfect. Yeah, I really like those thoughts. Thanks, Christopher. Absolutely. And as a clinician, I like having that input. So thank you. Garrett, what advice would you give a student on the spectrum when it comes to taking things literally and trusting your environment? And I'm gonna have you give me like the 3-minute version, please.
Okay. So, yes. First answer the question. What advice do I have to give about taking people literally? Oh, so that's something that I've always had trouble with that, actually. I tend to take people for what they say and not necessarily for what they mean. And when I was younger, that used to get me into a lot of trouble because kids kind of say whatever and they mean one thing, they say something else. And so when I was younger, I used to take offense whenever someone would poke fun at me or make fun of me jokingly, and I would get into fights when I was younger, and I'd get kicked out of school and in trouble and all this kind of stuff. And So something that I had to learn was how to trust that I'm in a safe environment and I'm in a space where no one means to harm me, and to trust that my parents and later myself, now that I'm an adult, that I'm in an environment that is safe. So I think that would be probably the biggest thing that I would like to impart, because when you're an adult, you can't go punching someone out just because you misunderstand them.
That's true. And I'm sure it didn't work out too well for you when you were little.
This is true. I was
Yeah.
very small, and punching someone who's bigger than you is not wise.
I think what's really wonderful about that, Garrett, and it's something that I think it takes a lot of us a long time to realize, is that people want to like you. People want to get along with you. And so as a person who's a black and white thinker, make yourself think that you're in a safe environment, or only put yourself in environments that are safe. And know then and trust then that people are, in their way, showing kindness and camaraderie. I like that. That's nice. All right, Kelly, what are key challenges for autistics succeeding in college?
Well, I think that's important for all of us in this community to think about. No matter who we are, as an autistic college student, I think it's important to learn some of the practices, the successes of people who've been through college before you and were autistic. And of course, all of us out in the community serving students and loving students want to support them in this journey. I think one of the things is that the academic challenges are often not as trying or difficult for autistic students as the emotional and social challenges are. It doesn't mean that sometimes we do need academic supports. We have executive functioning issues. We need help with organizing, calendaring, that sort of thing. But we also have a lot of challenges with depression and anxiety. Can be general anxiety or social anxiety. That's very common for us. And also depression is extremely common. And these can take slightly different forms than people are used to or clinicians are used to. One person who practices with autistics found that they become disconnected very often from their interests when they're depressed. And this is a loss, I call it a loss of vitality, but that can be very deadening if a student is in a major, even if it's one that is conforming to their interests, but they're depressed, they can lose all sense of connection to that. Another common phenomenon in college students is because many of us who go to college are intellectually gifted or able, we tend to put a lot of our self-esteem and our identity and our intelligence and our performance in school. That can lead to perfectionism and into the cycle of procrastination and all the rest of it. It doesn't mean that neurotypicals don't have some of those same issues. There are perfectionist neurotypicals who begin to procrastinate, but because they may have other sources of social esteem, they may be able to weather those storms with greater resilience. But when an autistic who has put all their eggs in that basket of their intellect and their academic performance begins to suffer in that area due to depression or whatever it may be, the overwhelming challenges of a new college environment, then they can become suicidal. And our rates of suicide, suicidal ideation, especially in our young adult population, in that difficult transition to adulthood, which includes the college part of us as undergraduates in that traditional age group, they are significantly higher. Some studies say twice as much. So that is very, very concerning and something to track. So one of the things to consider is that at university, the mental health resources provided on campus are often insufficient. They're insufficient because campus clinical environments were developed just to triage students, to do short-term counseling. Sometimes they do a little bit of extended group therapy. Autistics don't all love group therapy, but So we often have to go to private therapists in the community, and not all therapists, some of them think they understand autistics and working with us, but I have found that many of the professionals who work with our population don't know nearly as much as they think they do. They have a lot of stereotyped ideas and they don't understand it with depth. They know what they've read in the books, but unless they've had a lot of experience of diverse people on the spectrum, including working with adults in particular, they don't really get us and are not terribly helpful. So that's another thing to keep in mind for college students on the spectrum. They're very often going to need private mental health resources. And finally, there is this social component. Many autistics are introverts. I'm going to contradict Jean there. I think the majority of us are introverted. Not all of us. Some of us are very extroverted, but they are freaks in our communities, we call them, and we love our freaks, but they're a little different. But for this social challenge, for all autistics, there is this difficulty sometimes making friends. And that, I had one autistic student I was coaching who never made a single friend in college. He just sat in his room or went to a basketball game. He ate alone. He did everything alone. And this was not a shy person. He would walk up to anybody at all, and just start talking to them. And it was often off-putting because he was loud and excited and voluble with them, and they just didn't know what to do with it. So, colleges need to include support programs for friendship making. That doesn't mean paid or assigned friends, but, but providing mechanisms for having people with shared interests. And not all autistics like each other. But if an autistic goes to a club meeting, people might not initially like that autistic person, their behavior, their manner, sometimes these micro slice, quick judgments of other people. One research found that neurotypicals typically don't like autistics when they meet them. Is it the prosody, the way they speak? Is it their information dumping? Is it something about their manner, their lack of focus on the person's eyes or face? We don't know why they don't like us all the time. But sometimes a peer mentor or a peer companion can help to navigate those social shoals and provide some advice. So it's very important for universities to have informed mental health about autistics. I recently called the suicide prevention line at the university for concerns about a client. The person I spoke to didn't know anything about suicidality and autism. That's a very dangerous state of affairs right here in our community. And we also currently do not have strong social supports for our autistic students. And loneliness is one of the greatest predictors of suicidality in young adults with autism. So we need to take that very seriously and make sure, especially during COVID times, that we're doing a good job with that.
Thank you, Kelly. We have about 3 minutes per panelist, no, 2 minutes per panelist left. And I think that we're not going to get to your second question. If you could, in 2 sentences or 3 sentences, say something about your experience as a person with autism that you'd like everyone to hear, I would love for you to do that. I also plan, panelists, if you need to get off right at 7, you are welcome to do so. I will stay on the call if there's anyone who has some extra questions, and anyone who would like to stay on the call, please do. We'll stay probably for another 10 minutes. So should I call on you, or do y'all have something that you are thinking that you'd like to share? Call on us. Okay, Christopher.
I believe that there are not enough good mental health facilities out there that assess people's strengths. And I want someone who can work with me to identify what I'm doing right in a conversation, what I'm doing wrong in a conversation. I also believe that there's just not enough services that are adequate to where they're fitting what I need as an autistic. I've been told that I'm sorry.
You were saying that there aren't enough services out there. I
Right.
think that is an agreed upon thing in Central Illinois, and in the community at large, and the dearth of
I'm very extroverted, and I know a lot of people. And when I travel overseas and I tell people that I have Asperger's, I've been to 17 different countries, and I meet people from all over the world, and they say, you don't act like you have Asperger's. That's because you don't act that way. You are who you are.
Right.
And I feel, to me, there's too many Friday nights that I'm at home alone being an extrovert because I don't know how to totally interact with people, like sometimes of the opposite sex. So I'm, very shy and timid and alone in life. And I have to, wonder my way through and feel things out for myself. I could use that person who could help me engage in those areas to expand my horizons and live the kind of life that I feel I and everyone else deserves that are on the spectrum.
Thank you, Christopher. For those of you who are students out there, this is a field of great need, something that we would love more professionals to be.
Can I just say one more thing about
if it's quick?
Yeah, it's quick. About mental health therapy, a lot of times, too many times, therapists go into what is called forgive me for using the coarse language, but they call it a bitch session, where you're talking about things that go wrong in your life. I want somebody who's going to work with me toward goals to achieve.
Yeah. Goal-driven therapy. I'm all for it, Christopher. All right. Garrett, what's something you'd like to say to the group?
2 to 3 sentences. Okay. If you find that you are working harder than your peers, or you come to believe you are working or putting more effort than your peers, that is okay. It does not mean you're any less capable. And you should just focus on doing what you like, no matter how long it takes you.
Thank you, Garrett. I love it. Great advice. Jennifer.
My parting words would be, there are a lot of misconceptions about what autistic lives look like, especially in women. And over the past 9 years, as I've been kind of waiting in the wings to figure out what was right and what was right for me, there's a lot of people out there who share very similar profiles to everyone who's on the panel today. And I'm hoping it's going to be a culture where there's more acceptance of coming out, and that it's more about being neurodiverse and neurodivergent and just thinking differently. But also know there's a cost, and there's definitely a lot of bias against that. And so I think I just want to make sure people know that there's a lot of individuals out there who are still afraid to come out because they're just not sure it's safe. But I'm hoping that our culture will continue to support them, and that basically that will change soon.
Me too. Thank you, Jennifer. Kelly, you've got the last 3 minutes. Oh, you're on mute, I think.
I don't want to end on a negative note, but I wanted to talk about masking and disclosure for a moment, because that's so vital to us, especially as young adults. In public school, you're often forced to come out to get services. But once you hit college, you get to decide. And in adulthood, certainly in other venues, you get to decide whether you disclose to people. Not all of us are invisibly disabled. Some of us can't mask, but many of us, as Jennifer was saying, can mask. And should we? There's research, some research that shows that it can lead to depression, a sense of disconnection, a loss of self, that loss of vitality I was talking about. But there are real consequences to being unmasked. People with autism experience discrimination, exclusion, all sorts of poor treatment, bullying in childhood forward. When they haven't even disclosed, just because they seem different. The other animals perceive us as different. And so we are a social pack, and even slightly different behaviors can cause people to discriminate. I will give you an example from my own life. I take extensive notes. I have auditory processing disorder and in general problems with sensory integration. And so many times people at meetings, people in my classes tell me not to take notes. Why is it any of their business? Why can't they just let me take my notes? They tell me I'm not making eye contact, or maybe they want to take notes or don't want to take notes, but they feel guilty. And so my taking notes is putting them out. I don't know what it is. It's continual. I sometimes use a walking stick now for balance. I've had people tell me I shouldn't take the elevator if I have a walking stick, right in the Illini Union. I did not know that person. It was none of their business. So, there are just small, now we call them microaggressions these days. I don't like that term very much. And I know it's grounded in critical race theory, but there is something to being a disabled person and needing to adapt to your environment that can be very off-putting to other people if they don't realize that it's rooted in your disability. And really, we should just all be more understanding of other people and their behaviors, their way of expressing themselves, unless there's some reason not to be, unless it's really harming the context or other people. We should just be understanding and accept quirkiness and differences. And finally, there's a lot of advice in different communities now, because so many autistics are very vocal about the pain of masking, the consequences of masking, and being forced to submerge themselves in order to fit in. And so now the advice is, well, tell everybody to unmask. No, that is dangerous advice, in my opinion. I think I'm the oldest one on the panel. And I have lived through beatings that knocked me to the ground where people kicked me. And I couldn't get up. I have been at a job interview recently, not that much recently because I've been working for a little while, but on this campus where a professor said to me, you'll have to forgive my colleagues. Some of them are autistic and they don't have any manners because of it. They don't know how to say please or thank you. There is so much stigma and bigotry, and people think they understand autism and they don't. And we are emotionally fragile because of a history of social exclusion and isolation very often. So please be very careful what you tell autistic people about unmasking. Validate them, tell them you are wonderful just as you are. Your brain works differently, but that means you have gifts and strengths. And at the same time, I acknowledge these real challenges. People are mean. People are bad a lot of the time to us. And people think they know more than they do. So be cautious about recommending unmasking. But if somebody wants to unmask and live freely, they're going to do it partially like neurotypicals. It's not all or nothing. Even for you guys out there who are neurotypical, you can't just burst into song in a meeting or go around without pants. These are things I would like to do, but society tells me it's not right. So I keep my pants on and I sing in private. Okay. I do use a yo-yo sometimes when I walk around campus. It's weird, but it's me. There's a certain amount of disclosure that we can all live with. So very often, because of that black and white thinking, when we do disclose, we have trouble with that gray area. And for all of us, social thinking, social communication is a gray area. Help us to navigate that if we want to disclose more, but it's certainly not all or nothing. And I hope that we can go toward that utopian future where we're all accepted and loved. I don't believe in it anymore. I've been kicked to the ground. I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's likely to happen. But I do think we can all be more compassionate and supportive of one another. And I thank you for coming today. I think that means you're part of the good folks who want that too. And thanks for giving us a forum.
Thank you so much to everyone on the panel and everyone who attended. Bridget Hillier said, what a great discussion. I hope this conversation continues across campus and we can work together to help make this a more inclusive, and now it's just more people wrote stuff, so I lost it, a more inclusive and comfortable environment for all with more of the resources that we need. Thank you for sharing your stories and views. Everyone, thank you so much for your input. I did have an emailed question about being in engineering and suspecting some of their quirky, bright students. If you want to stay on the call to discuss that, you're welcome to. Everyone else, it's 7:03, so it is socially appropriate for you to sign off. If you would like, I'm going to stick around, and anyone else who would like to stick around is welcome as well. I will be officially ending things by 7:15.
Hey, Jeannie.
Yes.
Hi, this is Hannah.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi. This was great. Has there, so on campus, there, and I can't now think of the, I can't think of the name of the office. I'll have to get that to you, but it's, they used to call it T4B. That was years and years, I think T4B. Anyway, it's based, continuing like professional development for those of us on campus that work on campus. And this would be wonderful. I mean, I don't know if a talk like this or an actual seminar workshop would be wonderful, especially for those of us in HR that work with, we're in on all the interviews. It's very hard. I have found it, let me put it myself, I have found it to be difficult to explain or try to, how do I want to say this? It's, I think we all can, I mean, autism, no one looks like they're autistic. I mean, I mean, yes, as Kelly had said, people have quirky things, right? We can all have quirky things, but I have found it's very hard to explain someone's behavior, for example, in an interview, as, you know, well, I think that, because I've had it brought up, and this is over years of, well, you know, they didn't really, you know, there wasn't a lot of eye contact, or they seemed to be fidgeting, or they didn't really answer the question, or they didn't understand the question. Well, the question wasn't a black and white question. It was a, how do you feel about this question? Which I can understand more now with Wilson, that that is an odd question to ask in an interview for someone whose mind thinks that way. Right. That these, because I do think being on engineering campus, I know who else said that, but there are a lot of minds on engineering campus that think the way I'm sure function as an autistic mind. And so it's a one-track mind. But it would be very helpful for those of us in administration to learn more, but more importantly, how to properly, I think, interview and therefore hire, because they will be good employees, and they will, right, they will function well. I mean, yeah. And especially I've had that brought up more than once, and that, well, he doesn't talk. Okay, well, what does that have to do with him fixing your computer? Right. It doesn't. I mean, he doesn't need to make small talk with you. He needs to fix your computer.
Right. Well, Hannah, I don't know if you know this, but we sure could use ambassadors out there who are connecting with the people who make decisions at the university, and connecting us with them, or, you know, Kelly, Christopher, Garrett, or Jennifer with them, to have a conversation. I would love to be a conduit for anyone who wants to get something like that set up. Just say who you'd like to speak, and what you would like them to talk about, and I can help arrange that. That's kind of my job, is to help arrange that. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be anyone from TAP. It can be anyone else you heard from on this call. So please go forth and be ambassadors. be people who are making connections. I encourage you to do that. I don't know, is the person who answered or who asked the question, who's from engineering, still on the call? If you are, please identify yourself.
Did you say Bridget?
I don't know who, I don't have the name, I just have the question. It said they suspect some of their quirky, bright students may be high functioning on the spectrum. If they have made it this far without being diagnosed, is there anything we should watch for, or
Oh,
kindly let them know about resources? Many struggle academically for the first time when they get here. Also, that struggle may create doubt, fear, even panic for the first time. What sorts of
yeah.
staff member notice which might indicate the student could learn more about functioning with the condition? And I would open that up.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, gosh, DRES, which I know what it is, but I can't tell you what it stands for. I don't remember. I know, gosh, it's been 18, 24 months now. I think that they gave a presentation, a talk, specifically, I think, about assisting students.
Mhm.
But I'm sure with COVID, whatever plans had been made about continuing that just didn't go through, or I don't know anything about it anymore. But that doesn't surprise me. I don't know. I can't say that I've heard anything from our unit regarding our students, but then again, I've never asked, but I can certainly ask, especially, I'm assuming they're talking more about undergrad students and transitioning from home.
And I'm wondering if any of the panelists have any about that.
I would like to say something on behalf of people that are in HR, working with people on the spectrum. I used to work in a correctional facility, and that was not a good fit for me. And they basically had all kinds of policies about different things, sexual harassment. I was sexually harassed at my job. And then when I came back and told them I had a disability, that's when I decided to disclose or unmask that I had Asperger's. And they tried to go against what I said and basically called me a liar, and basically would not allow me to have any accommodations that I asked for. And because I told on the person that sexually harassed me, they ran me out of the job that I was there for a year and a half. It was very traumatic to me. I have PTSD over it. But you know, all I'm going to say to people in HR is that you need to be aware of bullying and harassment and different things of that nature, because it does exist, and we all want to create a safe haven for everyone at the university to be comfortable that they can disclose their disability without being felt like they're harassed and ridiculed. That was a very low spot in my life. I've risen above and I've moved on to greater things, better things. But it just aggravates me when we have to, as an employee of the university, we're taking sexual harassment tests, training every year. And I tell them my story and just basically almost tell them that it's a lot of lip service to me, because I don't see where people are adhering those rules that they need to put in place to prevent that. Right. And keep it safe for everyone.
Thanks, Christopher. Yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you, and that's good insight. I think that we all agree that at every level at the university, we could use some more education. Um,
Can I speak to the, Jean, can I speak to the dress question?
sure.
So this is Kelly. DRES has a history of trying to work with autistic students and improve their lot in life, and bless them for it. They're very well intentioned. They're typically understaffed for the volume of students that they need to serve. I have volunteered with DRES, and I've tried to access their services for my son and come up with absolutely no help. So I'm sorry for that. And I currently, in my coaching business on the side, I work with a former member of the DRES staff who was the head of their cognitive disabilities practice there, and is a wonderful person. And their clinicians in general are just lovely people, but we don't have a transitional program for students entering the university at the undergraduate or graduate level. We don't have a special orientation. We don't have any kind of services like that. We do now have career services focused on disability. It doesn't necessarily do social skills training yet for autistic students. Sometimes there's a neurodiversity social group that runs at DRES. It's been, people haven't been coming to it during the COVID times because they just don't want to meet virtually, I guess. So that's been suspended for a little bit. And there's a new activist group on campus among students called DREAM. And they're very active, and they want to have a disability house on campus and create a cultural and social identity. And I went to their first recent meeting, and now, well, this was about a year ago, and now they've been very active online, and they're still fomenting and supporting one another. And they're a really terrific group, and they range across disability. And I think that's a wonderful community for students. So there's a little bit of it there, but I think one of the issues is that, University of Illinois has a fabulous, a world-class history in supporting physical disability, although in COVID times, there's been some difficulty around that with the housing crisis. But it has not been great with supporting disabilities associated with mental health or cognitive differences. And we all need to step up our game there. Human resources has also lagged. I mean, the story that Christopher tells, I could tell you stories also that would make you weep and gnash your teeth from my own experience. It's real, it's a problem, and it's too bad. But there is hope for the future. And I think that the disability coordinator that we have now, Allison Kushner, she and I have been emailing. She's a doctoral student in special education. We have the #1 special education program in the United States, and she's a doctoral student there. I think she's terrific and gets it. And one of the things we all need to promote is disability as a form of diversity. Universities tend to respond administratively to those concepts for which they're rewarded in funding, or how they look at the legislative level and the state or the federal. And diversity in general is very important. Racial diversity, gender diversity, very, very important concepts, and not to take away from any of those, but disability is the largest diversity category in the United States, with about 25% of the population, about 10% of university students, are disabled, and about 25% of the US population is disabled. So we need to think about disability as a legitimate form of diversity that needs to be thought of for inclusion and support. So DRES is doing what it can, but it needs to be every office at the university at all levels that are participating, drawing upon resources like Jean and TAP, and all the other resources on campus, the Veterans Center. There's so many people who are getting involved now, and I know HR will do their part. So I look forward to that, everybody just getting involved and being a part of this.
To put in a plug for our TAP social communication expert, Joan Gorsuch. She's persisted through COVID in keeping a social group. That's how Garrett and Christopher are here. They are connected to us through her. And so she really has done a fabulous job in staying connected with students. TAP and the Department of HDFS, the Human Development and Family Studies Department, actually have tossed out the idea of having a culture house for autism. So we are really, I think, having conversations where we can unite. I think there might be pods out there of people who are doing things, and if we could unify the efforts, I think we'd be much more efficient and effective. So I'm glad that you brought up the other people who are doing the work. We can do that together. I think on that note, I want to be respectful of people's time. I want to say thank you very, very much for sticking on the call. I'm going to put my email address in the chat. And if anyone would like to email me, I can connect you with the panelists. And I can't do two things at once. So there's my email address. If you'd like to connect with any of the panelists or have any further questions or like to keep the dialogue going, please do. Everyone have a great evening. Thank you so much to Jennifer, Garrett, Kelly, and Christopher for sharing your experiences. Everyone who's here, we're just so thankful that you came. Good night.
Thank you, Jean.
Thank
You're
you.
terrific. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, thanks.